Peace, peace. Welcome back to what I call Rational Lens Podcast or Forum, whatever one you want to use. I'm your host, Minkefa Ra, aka they call me Rock. When I left off, we was talking, this is part 2, matter of fact. When I left off from part 1, this is part 2. We was talking about the Rothschilds and how they built their dynasty. Maya Angelou Rothschild, who started off as a coin dealer, had 5 sons, sent them to different places in Europe, right? They started off as coin dealing, and then later on, they started banking for the German noble families. You understand? So these bankers went from coin dealing into doing business with the royal bloodline of England, Paris, Germany, and the United States. They were the ones that were behind creating the 13 colonies, because one of Rothschild's sons, right, one of his sons went to England. Nathan Meyer Rothschild moved to England and created the highly successful London branch. Nathan Meyer Rothschild and Son was the name. So England, we know, London, Britain, the 13 colonies, right? They sent their conquistadors over here to rob and steal natural resources and land from the Indians and enslave them, and then they set up these 13 colonies. These 13 colonies were corporations that were under the jurisdiction of the British royal family. And the banker of the British royal family of Britain was the Rothschilds, right? So I want to finish breaking down his 5 sons and the different parts of Europe they went to. So we know that Angelou Meyer Rothschild stayed in Frankfurt, which is Germany. Solomon Meyer Rothschild went to Vienna, right? Nathan Meyer Rothschild, who was real important, moved to England and created the highly successful London branch, which was known as Nathan Meyer Rothschild and Sons. Carl Meyer Rothschild opened a branch in Naples. James Meyer Rothschild established the Paris branch, de Rothschild Forez, right? It says the Napoleonic War financing. The family used this pan-European network to profit during the Napoleon Neolithic Wars by coordinating the shipment of bullions and providing financial subsidies to the British military and their allies. Their information network also gave them an advantage in the financial market, right? So they even control the Napoleonic Wars, right? When Napoleon went to war with Britain. So these shows you right here that these people have enough power to control war. And they still do the same thing today, these families. So getting back to Donald Trump and him going bankrupt, being 1.8 billion in debt. He was 1.8 billion in debt to the Rothschild family because they were the ones financing him, right? And he was partners with a guy named Wilbur Ross. Wilbur Ross was Wilbur Ross was a real important person because he worked with the Rothschilds. You understand? He was their boy. And through Wilbur Ross is how Donald Trump interacted with the Rothschilds. Like I told you, the Rothschilds are one of the most powerful families on the planet. They also control the Federal Reserve Bank. They're part of the 13 families, right? Let's see who those 13 families are. which we know the Rothschilds are one of them. I want to bring up a so when we go to bloodline of the Illuminati, right? We learn about these 13 families. And the reason why they're called the Illuminati, they're the enlightened ones, meaning that they have high degree of knowledge. They know certain things that we don't. And so that makes them enlightened. And enlightened means light, which comes from Lucifer. So these people worship Lucifer, and they use the degrees of light or degrees of knowledge that's based on the Luciferian doctrine to control and dominate the world and enslave the people of the planet. So this is the reason why they're called the Illuminati, because the word Illuminati means illumination or illuminated ones. And their symbol is the torch bearer, which means Lucifer. You understand? And they say Lucifer deceived the whole world. Why? Because the reflection of light is an illusion. It's not real. So that's why he was able to deceive the world. So these bloodlines, that worship Lucifer, this is what they're dealing with. And I want to give you the names of these bloodlines. And there's a good book that's out. It's written by Fritz Springmeier, The Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Real good book. And the book goes into the bloodlines of the Illuminati, and it gives all the names. So one of the families, the Astors, right? Astors is one of the Illuminati families. Wait, let me do this right. Give me 1 minute because I want to get a list. But get that book if you want to know about the bloodlines of the Illuminati. It's written by Fritz Springmeier, Bloodline Illuminati. Right? But I want to give y'all the names of these powerful people. And they're some of the families that run the Federal Reserve. And the Rothschilds are one of them. So you have these powerful families like the Vanderbilts. Cornelio Vanderbilt built his fortune in shipping and railroad, creating a monopoly that led to his being called a robber baron. The Carnegie family. Andrew Carnegie was a steel magnate who amassed vast wealth through ruthless capitalist practice. The Rockefellers. John D. Rockefeller created a vast oil monopoly through his Standard Oil Company, a feat described as stifling competition and forming at the expense of others. The Gould family. Jay Gould built a massive railroad empire through what was considered unethical business practices. The Morgan family. J.P. Morgan was a financier who created large corporations like the United States Steel and General Electric, making him a prominent robber baron. Ford family. Henry Ford, an industrialist known for his revolutionary automobile production, is another name associated with the era of the robber barons. Astor family. John Jacob Astor was one of the earliest prominent American industrialists and wealthy figures during the Gilded Age. So these families are what you call robber barons because they use unethical tactics to make money. You understand? This is the reason why they're called the Illuminati. Not just because they're light bearers and they have knowledge, the degree of knowledge, but their degree of knowledge is based on Lucifer. And we know that Lucifer can play tricks with your mind. He can make you see things that ain't there. So that's why they deal with unethical. This is how they make their money. You understand? Give me 1 minute. dead. I don't know why he charging. Right? So they deal with unethical business practices. This is how they develop their wealth and their power, by doing people wrong. And they're unethical. That's how you know that they're the seed of the devil, of Lucifer, because they practice unethical, immoral culture. You understand? And this is how they develop their power. They don't do it the right way. So, getting back to Donald Trump and him being 1.8 million in debt to the Rothschilds through a guy that was by the name of William Ross. William Ross, he controlled the Deutsche Bank, and through the Deutsche Bank, he paid Donald Trump debt. You understand? So I want to give y'all a little about who's Wilbur Ross. Give me 1 minute. It says, Wilbur Ross was a prominent investment banker at Rothschild Incorporated for 24 years before founding his own private equity firm, which is the Deutsche Bank, right? He was widely known as the king of bankruptcy for his expertise in reconstructing financial distress companies. So this is the reason why Donald Trump went to him. Donald Trump went bankrupt 6 times, so he went to Wilbur Ross. And it says right here, William Ross, known as the king of bankruptcy for his expertise in reconstructing financially distressed companies. You understand? So this guy, Donald Trump, and the Rothschilds, that was the connection. Donald Trump, William Ross, and the Rothschilds. William Ross worked for the Rothschilds for 24 years before he found his own private equity firm, which is known as Deutsche Bank. You understand? And it was William Ross who helped Donald Trump deal with his bankruptcy, because Donald Trump was in debt to the Rothschilds. And this is the way how he became president. You understand? Let me go on. It says, time at Rothschild Inc., 1976 to 2000. Specializing after joining Rothschild New York office in 1976, Ross ran the firm bankruptcy reconstructing advisory practices, right? High-profile cases. He was involved in some of the largest bankruptcies in the time, including Texaco, Drexel, Burnham, Lambert, and Eastern Airlines. Working with Donald Trump. In the 1980s, when Donald Trump casinos in Atlantic City were on the verge of collapsing, Ross represented investors. He negotiated a deal that allowed Donald Trump to remain in control of his properties. And the reason how he arranged that deal, because he was working for the Rothschilds. You understand? And this is how Donald Trump was able to maintain when his Atlantic City casinos was falling apart. He went to Wilbur Ross, who was working for the Rothschilds, and he helped Donald Trump maintain his properties while he was going through bankruptcy. You understand? So, like I was telling y'all, it's these big billionaires that run the government and they control our president. They're the puppeteers to our president. And at the time, the Rothschilds ran the Federal Reserve, and they also was lending money to Donald Trump. This is before he became president. But he had to become president because it was another way of him working off his debt to the big Rothschild banking family. And through Wilbur Ross, that's how that was possible. And it tells you right here, working with Donald Trump. In 1980, when Donald Trump casinos in Atlantic City was on the verge of collapse, Ross represented investors. He negotiated a deal that allowed Donald Trump to retain control of his property. Right? So that's Wilbur Ross. He worked for the Rothschild for 24 years, and he also helped Donald Trump deal with his bankruptcy situation when his casinos in Atlantic City was falling apart. And he was also the one where Donald Trump got his money from, because he was the plug to the Rothschilds. So this is, if y'all understand, this is how Donald Trump got to be president, because he working off his debt to these billionaires. And so he become a puppet for them, and he carries out their agenda, which is a New World Order agenda. You understand? We're going to get back talking about BlackRock and Larry Fink. You understand? So what happened was, during the COVID thing, that crisis with COVID, it was Larry Fink and BlackRock that helped the Federal Reserve and bailed them out, because they were losing a lot of money during COVID. COVID disrupted the globalization of what was going on the planet. So when COVID happened, the Federal Reserve needed somebody to manage their assets. And it was Larry Fink of BlackRock who was there to help them. And this put him in the power to control the Federal Reserve, or have influence in the Federal Reserve. So you have these 13 families that I just named to you, one of them being the Rothschilds, and you have Larry Fink working together. And they're both using Donald Trump as a puppet, because soon as Larry Fink came in to bail out the Federal Reserve during COVID, right, that gave him a position in power to influence the Federal Reserve. And so he also had the power to influence Donald Trump. So you have these big billionaire corporations like the Rothschilds and BlackRock, and you have Donald Trump as their puppet, right? So I want to read this article where the CEO of BlackRock bails out the Federal Reserve by helping managing their assets. And by him doing that, that was a good opportunity for BlackRock, because we know that the Federal Reserve is one of the most powerful and centralized banks on the planet. And when they need help to manage their assets, then that was an opportunity for BlackRock to have some influence, not just in the Federal Reserve, but in the world economic system of money, the stock market, exchange, Wall Street, and all that. And was an opportunity for him to have control of the president, Donald Trump. So give me 1 minute. Because this is a real good article. So check it out what they say. So we got to be careful and dodge the sabotage, because sometimes they say stuff in this AI information overview that contradicts. You know, they can't give us the whole truth. So sometimes we got to use our logic. Here we go again. We got to use our logic. We got to use our third eye lens to decipher what they're really saying, right? But I'm going to read it. And at the same time while I'm reading it, I'm going to decipher the code, right? It says, AI overview. BlackRock manages the Federal Reserve assets. No, BlackRock does not manage the Federal Reserve. Rather, the Federal Reserve, specifically the New York Fed, hired BlackRock. So if they hired BlackRock, what did they hire BlackRock to do? BlackRock is a asset management corporation. So they had to hire BlackRock to manage their assets. And if you need help managing your assets, that means that your finances is falling apart. So the Federal Reserve had to call in BlackRock, aka Larry Fink, the CEO, to manage the assets of the Federal Reserve because financially they were falling apart. Why they were falling apart? This was during the time of COVID. You understand? What a lot of people don't know, COVID disrupted the globalization of the economic system of the world because things had to shut down. People had to quarantine. So that means that nothing is moving, no money is being made. So this is affecting us, affecting the world economically. And so they had to call in Larry Fink of BlackRock to manage their assets, right? So it says BlackRock, it says no, BlackRock does not manage the Federal Reserve, right? Rather, the Federal Reserve, specifically the one in New York, hired BlackRock. So if it doesn't manage it, it hired it to do what? Manage its assets, right? It says it hired BlackRock in 2020 to manage specific bond buying programs during the COVID-19 pandemic, paying fees for these services. BlackRock's role was to act as an agent for the feds in the purchase of corporate bonds and commercial mortgage-backed securities to stabilize the bond market, not to manage the Federal Reserve itself, right? But if it's managing its assets, then that means that it's managing the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve is about money. And if they're having problems with their money and they got to call somebody in to manage it, then that means that BlackRock is managing the Federal Reserve. But they don't want to tell us that. But this is what was going on during COVID, because everything was shutting down. There wasn't no money being made. And they had to still maintain through the pandemic. So they called BlackRock to manage their assets. You understand? And this was an opportunity for Larry Fink, because now he's in the position to influence the Federal Reserve, Wall Street, the stock market, and also the president at the time was Donald Trump. Let's keep on going. It says BlackRock role with the feds. Agents for bond purchasing. In the response to the economic turmoil of the pandemic, the Federal Reserve appointed BlackRock to manage portfolios of bonds on its behalf, right? Pacific programs. BlackRock oversaw purchases for the primary market corporate credit facilities and the secondary market corporate credit facilities, right? Commercial mortgages. The firm also managed the purchase of commercial mortgages, backed securities guaranteed by United States government agencies. Fees. BlackRock was paid fees for its services, with the term of the contract specifying how fees were charged based on the portfolio size, right? Key points. No direct management. BlackRock involved was limited to the execution of these specific financial operations, not the management of the Federal Reserve overall policies or structures. But still, if you're asking people to help with certain parts of your finance, that means that you have some type of control, because money is power. And if people have control over your money, then that means they have a little bit of control over your situation. in the Federal Reserve aspect, which is a big centralized bank, BlackRock had a little bit of power and influence to deal with their business, which is banking. Response to crisis. This arrangement was a direct response to the economic crisis caused by the pandemic, mirroring a similar arrangement during the 2008 financial crisis. All right? Fiduciary duties. While BlackRock is a private asset manager, it acts as an agent for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, a public institution with specific instructions and ethical considerations outlined in agreement. Right? So this is what BlackRock did, Larry Fink. He helped the New York Federal Reserve manage their assets. In 2020, during the crisis of the pandemic, and by this was his opening a position to influence the world economically, because when you're helping the most powerful financial banking system on the planet, which is the Federal Reserve, right? That means that you have access to control the manipulation of the economy system, of the stock market, of Wall Street. And this is what BlackRock did. And they also had control of Donald Trump, because we know that the Federal Reserve, which is one of the most powerful centralized banks on the planet, which is ran by 13 families, these Illuminati bloodlines, which are Zionist Jews, right? Donald Trump was put in position by them. And one of the families, one of the powerful families that's part of that system or that organization that runs the Federal Reserve is the Rothschilds. So we know that Donald Trump was in debt to the Rothschilds, and Wilbur Ross had to help him with his bankruptcy situation, because his casinos in Atlantic City was falling apart, and he had to file bankruptcy. And Wilbur Ross, who worked for the Rothschilds for 24 years, came to the rescue and helped him. You understand? So when we talk about BlackRock and them bailing out the Federal Reserve, this was the opportunity for BlackRock to influence globally the economic situation around the world and to control the president. Right? So now we're going to go to the next phase, because Larry Fink just didn't become an influencer of the most powerful centralized bank on the planet, the Federal Reserve. He also was appointed to the chairman of the Economic World Forum. Anybody that's familiar with the Economic World Forum, the ECF, this is where a place where financiers, billionaires, millionaires, your elite come together and they plan economically what's the agenda for the world. And Larry Fink of BlackRock was appointed the chairman, right? So let's see what the World Economic Forum is and who runs the World Economic Forum, right? Give me 1 minute. Let me bring this up, because this is going to get real interesting. And then you understand how much power BlackRock really has. So we're talking about the World Economic Forum. Larry Fink of BlackRock, who owns 12.5 trillion assets around the world, management, right, is appointed to the World Economic Forum as the chairman, right? Matter of fact, let me do this first before we talk about the World Economic Forum. It says Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, is the interim co-chair of the World Economic Forum Board of Trustees, a position he shares with Andre Hoffman, appointed in August 2025. Fink is a billionaire businessman and a powerful voice in global finance and ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing. His influence at the WEF is expected to further integrate blockchain and digital set into a global economic policy. Y'all hear that? It says his influence at the WEF is expected to further integrate blockchain and digital assets into global economic policy. So remember what I said, this global new world order is going to be digitalized through cryptocurrency, blockchain, digital assets, right? He's going to set the policy for this. And he sits on the board of trustees. He's the co-chair of the World Economic Forum. He sits on the board of trustees. So he has a lot of power. He's a billionaire businessman, right? And a powerful voice in global finance and ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Environmental means he has the power to control our environment, right? And social, meaning he can control our society and governance, right? Investing. So he's investing in environment control, social control, which is another form of social engineering, and governance. His influence at the WEF is expected to further integrate blockchain and digital assets into global economic policy. So globalization, new world order, right? Let's see what blockchain means. Anybody that knows cryptocurrency, they should be familiar with blockchain, right? Blockchain is a decentralized digital ledger that securely records transactions across a network of computers, making data transparent, immutable, and resistant to tampering. It consists of chronologically linking blocks of verified transactions, forming a secure and unchangeable chain. The technology is the foundation for cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, but its applications extend to supply chain management, healthcare, and energy trading. So when we talk about blockchain, we're talking about a decentralized digital ledger, right? That's what they say, a decentralized digital ledger. But once BlackRock and Larry Fink gets into cryptocurrency, these trillionaires, right along with Donald Trump, it ain't going to be decentralized no more. It's going to be controlled and manipulated by these mega billionaire and trillionaires. You understand? And they're going to be dictating what the cryptocurrency is going to be doing. So like I told people, eventually cryptocurrency, blockchain was not going to stay decentralized. They were going to find a way to control it. And they did. BlackRock, Federal Reserve, and Donald Trump, and all the other affiliates like Vanguard, State Street Corporation, and Fidelity, right? says blockchain is a securely recorded transaction across a network of computers, making data transparent, immutable, and resistant to tampering. So it's a way of making data transparent, immutable, and resistance to tampering. Right? So when you're doing these transactions with cryptocurrency, the blockchain is making things so that people won't be able to tamper with your transactions. It's making it immutable and transparent, right? And resistance to tampering. It consists of chronological linked blocks of verified transactions. So these blockchains are transactions of money, or cryptocurrency, right? This is a technology that they're using. It says the technology is found for cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. So Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, the Federal Reserve, these billionaire trillionaires are going to be controlling this thing now, and they're going to globalization the world under one order through the digital money, through the digital banks. This is what I mean by the New World Order being digitalized. It's going to be a New World Order digitalized. And people like BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, State Street Corporation, the Federal Reserve is going to be in on it. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to give y'all the rest. I'm going to give y'all part 3.